My 72-year-old neighbor Gladys shocked everyone at the community center last week when she loudly announced someone's private medical issues to the entire room. The silence was deafening. People literally got up and moved away from her table. What Gladys didn't realize is that she'd been doing subtle versions of this behavior for months, and nobody had the heart to tell her. If you're over 60, you might be unknowingly pushing people away too. Today I'm revealing 9 uncomfortable behaviors that seniors develop as they age, behaviors that family and friends are too polite to mention. Some of these might sting, but recognizing them could save your most important relationships. Today I'm revealing 9 uncomfortable truths about aging behaviors that family members are too polite to mention. These aren't the obvious things like forgetting names or moving slower. These are the subtle social habits that creep in after 60 that can quietly destroy relationships without you even realizing it. I'll show you how to spot these habits in yourself, why they happen from a psychological standpoint, and most importantly, how to fix them before they damage your relationships with your children, grandchildren, and friends. Each of these behaviors has a root cause, and once you understand why your brain starts defaulting to these patterns, you can actually reverse them. Here's what we'll cover: why you might be interrupting conversations more than you think, the complaint trap that pushes people away, how technology resistance creates generational walls, when advice giving becomes relationship poison, personal boundary issues that make others uncomfortable, hygiene changes nobody wants to discuss, driving decisions that affect everyone's safety, financial behaviors that manipulate family dynamics, and the isolation pattern that damages your independence. The number 9 habit at the end might be the most shocking of all. It's something that almost every senior does without realizing it, and it's probably the biggest relationship killer on this entire list. But here's the thing: awareness is power. Just by watching this video, you're already ahead of 90% of people your age who never question these behaviors. And if you find value in this honest conversation, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real talk about aging gracefully. I promise every video gives you practical tools, not just problems. By the end of this, you'll have a clear action plan to strengthen your relationships and avoid the social mistakes that isolate so many seniors. Let's dive in. The first behavior that pushes people away is what I call the interruption epidemic. If you're over 60, you've probably noticed you interrupt conversations more than you used to, or you finish other people's sentences before they're done talking. Your family might exchange glances when you do it, but they're too polite to call you out. Here's why this happens: as we age, our brain's processing speed changes. You actually start thinking faster than younger people can talk, especially about topics you're familiar with. Your decades of experience mean you can predict where conversations are heading, so your brain jumps ahead. It's not rudeness, it's your experienced mind trying to be efficient. But here's what most people don't realize about why this happens: it's also about fear. Fear that you'll forget your important point if you don't say it immediately. Fear that you won't get another chance to contribute to the conversation. Fear that people will move on without hearing your valuable input. The problem is, when you interrupt, you're sending a message that what you have to say is more important than what they're saying. Even if that's not your intention, that's how it feels to the other person. They start to feel unheard and unvalued around you. Here's your awareness technique: start counting to 3 in your head after someone finishes a sentence before you respond. This gives them space to continue their thought and gives you time to process what they actually said instead of what you thought they were going to say. Another powerful technique is the repeat back method. Before you add your point, briefly summarize what they just said. So you're saying your job interview went well, but you're worried about the salary negotiation. This proves you were listening and creates natural conversation flow. The hardest part is catching yourself in the moment. Ask a trusted family member to give you a gentle signal when you interrupt, maybe touching their ear or a specific phrase like "let me finish that thought." It might feel awkward at first, but breaking this habit will dramatically improve your relationships. The second behavior that quietly damages relationships is what I call the complaint cascade. This is when every conversation somehow turns into a list of your aches, pains, and grievances about how the world has changed. You might start with "How are you?" But within minutes you're describing your arthritis, criticizing modern technology, or lamenting how rude people have become. Here's the psychology behind this. Complaining actually releases stress hormones that provide temporary relief. It's your brain's way of processing frustration and seeking connection through shared struggles. Plus, when you're dealing with real physical discomfort or watching the world change rapidly, talking about it feels necessary and validating. The problem is that chronic complaining creates what psychologists call emotional labor for your listeners. They feel obligated to offer solutions, express sympathy, or absorb your negative emotions. Over time, people start to dread conversations with you because they know they'll leave feeling drained. This next habit is something I see in my own family, and it's heartbreaking because the person complaining genuinely doesn't realize they're doing it. They think they're just sharing their daily reality, but to everyone else, it sounds like nothing in their life is ever good. Here's how to share your concerns without becoming a chronic complainer. Use the reality sandwich technique. Start with something positive, share your concern briefly, then end with something hopeful or positive. Instead of "My back is killing me and the doctor doesn't listen," try "I had a good morning walk, though my back's been bothering me lately, I'm hoping physical therapy will help." Also, implement the 2-complaint rule. Allow yourself to mention 2 genuine concerns per conversation, then consciously redirect to asking about the other person or sharing something you're grateful for. Most importantly, distinguish between venting and problem solving. If you just need to vent, say so. "I just need to get this off my chest, then I'd love to hear about your week." This gives people permission to listen without feeling responsible for fixing your problems. The third behavior that creates distance in your relationships is the technology tantrum. This happens when you refuse to learn new devices, get visibly frustrated with smartphones or computers, or make statements like "I don't need all this complicated stuff" or "things were simpler in my day." What feels like reasonable resistance to you feels like stubborn rejection to your family. Here's the deeper issue. Technology resistance isn't really about the devices, it's about control and competence. Learning new technology can feel threatening because it highlights areas where you're not the expert anymore. Your grandchildren can navigate apps faster than you can dial a phone number, and that shift in competence can feel destabilizing. There's also a legitimate cognitive load factor. Your brain, which has decades of established patterns, has to work harder to learn new systems. What takes a teenager 5 minutes might take you 30, and that's frustrating when you're used to being capable and efficient. Pay attention to this one. It affects every relationship you have because technology is now woven into every aspect of communication. When you refuse to text, avoid video calls, or get angry at devices, you're essentially putting barriers between yourself and the people you love. Your family starts planning around your limitations instead of including you naturally. Here's your gentle approach to staying current. Pick one technology skill per month and master it completely before moving to the next. Maybe January is texting, February is taking and sharing photos, March is video calling. Small, focused learning prevents overwhelm. Use the buddy system approach. Ask a patient family member to teach you one feature at a time during regular short sessions, not marathon crash courses. Write down the steps in your own words. This helps your brain retain the process. Most importantly, reframe your mindset. Instead of "I can't learn this," try "I'm learning this differently than younger people, and that's okay." Remember, you've learned countless new things throughout your life: driving cars, using microwaves, operating VCRs. This is just the next evolution, and staying connected with your loved ones is worth the temporary discomfort of learning. The fourth behavior that creates relationship tension is the unsolicited advice avalanche. This is when you constantly offer guidance to your adult children and grandchildren about their careers, parenting choices, finances, or relationships, even when they haven't asked for your input. You justify it by thinking "I'm just trying to help" or "I have experience they don't," but what feels like wisdom sharing to you feels like judgment and control to them. Here's why this happens. Your parental instincts don't disappear when your children turn 30, 40, or 50. You've spent decades protecting and guiding them, and watching them make what you perceive as mistakes triggers your protective response. Plus, you genuinely do have valuable life experience that could help them avoid pitfalls you've already navigated. The psychological trap is that giving advice makes you feel needed and relevant. When your active parenting role diminishes, offering guidance becomes a way to maintain your identity as the wise elder. Your brain interprets their independence as rejection of your value, so you unconsciously increase the advice giving to reassert your importance. I see this mistake destroying families every day in my practice. Adult children start avoiding phone calls, limiting visit time, or sharing less about their lives because every conversation becomes a lecture. They begin to feel like their choices are never good enough, and you start feeling like they don't respect your wisdom. Here's when to speak up and when to stay quiet. Only offer advice when directly asked, when someone's safety is genuinely at risk, or when you can share your experience without prescribing solutions. Instead of "you should leave that job," try "when I faced a similar situation, here's what I learned," then stop talking. Use the ask permission approach. "I've been in a similar situation, would you like to hear what worked for me?" This gives them control over whether they receive your input. If they say no, respect that boundary completely. Replace advice giving with curiosity. Instead of "you are making a mistake with that investment," ask "help me understand your thinking about that decision." This shows respect for their autonomy while still engaging with their choices. Remember, your role has evolved from teacher to supporter. The fifth behavior that makes people uncomfortable around you is the personal space problem. This includes standing too close during conversations, touching people without permission, like grabbing arms or patting shoulders, or sharing intimate personal details that make others squirm. You might not even realize you're doing it, but people start physically backing away from you or finding excuses to end conversations quickly. Here's the science behind the shift. As we age, our social filtering can become less precise. The part of your brain that automatically gauges appropriate social distance and boundaries doesn't work as sharply as it once did. Additionally, seniors often experience what's called touch hunger, a genuine need for physical connection that increases with age, especially if you live alone or have lost a spouse. There's also a generational factor at play. Social boundaries have shifted significantly over the decades. What was considered normal friendly behavior in your younger years, like casual touching or detailed health discussions, might feel invasive to younger generations who grew up with different social norms. This might make you uncomfortable, but it needs to be said, inappropriate boundary crossing is one of the fastest ways to make people avoid you entirely. When you stand too close, people feel trapped. When you touch without permission, they feel violated. When you overshare personal details about your medical issues, finances, or family drama, they feel burdened with information they didn't consent to receive. Here's how to maintain healthy social boundaries. Practice the arm's length rule. Maintain about an arm's length of space during conversations unless you're in a crowded area. Before touching anyone, even casually, ask yourself if you'd want a stranger or acquaintance touching you the same way. For conversation boundaries, use the TMI test. If the information you're about to share is something you'd normally only tell your doctor, spouse, or closest friend, it's probably too personal for casual conversation. Share your experiences, but keep intimate details private. Pay attention to body language cues. If someone steps back, creates physical barriers with their arms, or keeps looking away, they're signaling that you're too close or sharing too much. Respect these signals immediately by adjusting your behavior, not by pushing closer or sharing more to connect with them. The sixth behavior that quietly distances people from you is the hygiene decline. This is the most sensitive topic on our list, but it's crucial to address. This includes wearing the same clothes multiple days, having noticeable body or breath odor, neglecting dental care, or letting your appearance become unkempt. People won't tell you directly, but they'll start sitting farther away, keeping visits shorter, or making subtle comments about freshening up. Here's why this happens. Several age-related changes contribute to hygiene decline. Your sense of smell naturally diminishes with age, so you genuinely might not notice odors that are obvious to others. Vision changes can make it harder to see stains on clothing or spot grooming issues in mirrors. Physical limitations like arthritis, balance problems, or reduced mobility can make daily hygiene routines genuinely difficult or exhausting. There's also a psychological component. Depression, which is common but underdiagnosed in seniors, often manifests first through neglect of personal care. Additionally, if you live alone, there's less social accountability, no one sees you daily, so the motivation to maintain appearance standards can gradually fade without you realizing it. Cognitive changes can also affect your routine awareness. You might forget when you last showered, changed clothes, or brushed your teeth. What feels like yesterday to you might actually have been several days ago. The most important part is coming up right now, recognizing that hygiene decline isn't just about vanity or social expectations. Poor hygiene can indicate underlying health issues that need medical attention, and it directly impacts your social connections and quality of life. Here are practical solutions. Create a written daily hygiene checklist and check off each item: shower, brush teeth, clean clothes, deodorant. This removes the guesswork about what you've already done. Set phone alarms for hygiene routines if memory is an issue. Simplify your routine to make it sustainable. If daily showers feel overwhelming, focus on the essentials: face, hands, underarms, and teeth daily, with full showers every other day. Keep multiple sets of basic clothes that are comfortable and easy to clean. When to seek help: if physical limitations make hygiene difficult, talk to your doctor about adaptive tools or home health assistance. If you're struggling with motivation or forgetting routines, this could signal depression or cognitive changes that deserve medical evaluation. There's no shame in needing support. Maintaining your dignity and social connections is worth asking for help. The seventh behavior that creates serious family tension is driving denial. This happens when you refuse to acknowledge that your driving abilities have declined, you get defensive when family members express concerns, or you dismiss near-miss incidents as other people's fault. You might insist you're fine behind the wheel while your passengers grip the door handles, or your family secretly worries every time you leave the house. Here's the psychology behind driving denial. Your car represents independence, freedom, and identity. Losing your driving ability feels like losing a fundamental part of who you are. It's not just about transportation, it's about maintaining control over your life and not becoming a burden to others. Your brain naturally minimizes evidence that threatens this core aspect of your autonomy. There are also genuine physiological changes happening that you might not fully recognize. Your reaction time slows, peripheral vision narrows, night vision declines, and medications can affect alertness and coordination. But these changes happen gradually, so you unconsciously adapt your driving to compensate, driving slower, avoiding highways, or only driving during daylight, without realizing that these adaptations are signs of declining ability. The most dangerous part is that your brain fills in gaps in your awareness. If you miss seeing a pedestrian, your mind might convince you they weren't there. If you confuse the brake and gas pedal, you might blame the car's design. This isn't intentional dishonesty, it's your brain protecting your self-image. Don't skip this next part, it could save lives, including your own. Every year, thousands of preventable accidents happen because seniors continue driving beyond their safe abilities. The guilt of causing harm to an innocent person, especially a child, is something no one should have to live with. Here's how to evaluate your skills honestly. Take a professional driving assessment through your local DMV or driving rehabilitation specialist. These aren't pass-fail tests, they're objective evaluations that can identify specific areas of concern and adaptive strategies. Watch for warning signs: getting lost in familiar areas, having trouble judging distances, feeling overwhelmed by traffic, receiving traffic tickets, or having minor fender benders. Family members expressing concern isn't an attack on your abilities, it's love-based worry. Consider alternatives before you're forced to stop driving. Explore ride-sharing services, public transportation, grocery delivery, or community senior transportation programs. Some areas offer volunteer driver programs specifically for seniors. The key is planning your transition while you still have choices, rather than having driving privileges suddenly revoked after an incident. The eighth behavior that damages family relationships is money manipulation. This happens when you use financial guilt or inheritance threats to control your adult children's behavior. You might say things like, "After everything I've spent on you during disagreements," threaten to change your will when family members don't visit enough, or use financial support as leverage to get your way in family decisions. Here's why this develops. Money becomes one of the few areas where you still hold significant power as you age. When your physical abilities decline and your opinions carry less weight, financial control can feel like your last tool for maintaining influence and ensuring your needs are met. It's often rooted in fear of being abandoned, forgotten, or having your wishes ignored. There's also a generational factor at play. Many seniors grew up during times of financial uncertainty, where money represented security and control. Using financial leverage might feel like a natural extension of how you've always managed family dynamics, especially if you were the primary breadwinner for decades. The psychological trap is that financial manipulation often stems from a desire for connection and respect, but it achieves the opposite. When you use money to control behavior, you're essentially buying compliance rather than earning genuine care and attention. This behavior pattern is more common than you think, and it's incredibly destructive to family bonds. Your children start to question whether your love is conditional on their compliance. They might visit or call out of financial obligation rather than genuine affection, which leaves you feeling even more isolated and unloved, creating a vicious cycle. Here are healthy financial communication strategies. Be transparent about your financial situation and estate plans without using them as bargaining chips. If you're planning to leave inheritances, discuss your wishes openly rather than keeping them as mysterious leverage tools. Replace financial threats with direct communication about your needs. Instead of "I'm changing my will because you never visit," try "I miss spending time with you and would love to see you more often." Address the emotional need directly rather than using money as a weapon. If you're providing financial support to adult children, establish clear boundaries and expectations up front. Make it about helping them succeed, not about controlling their choices. And remember, gifts should be given freely without strings attached, or they're not really gifts at all. Most importantly, recognize that using money to control relationships ultimately undermines the very connections you're trying to preserve. Your family's love and respect can't be bought, but it can be earned through genuine care, respect for their autonomy, and healthy communication. The ninth and final behavior that quietly destroys relationships is the isolation trap. This happens when you become overly dependent on one person, usually an adult child, for all your social, emotional, and practical needs, while simultaneously refusing to socialize with peers or join age-appropriate activities. You might decline invitations to senior centers, resist making new friends, or guilt your adult children for having their own social lives because you've made them your entire world. Here's the psychology behind this pattern. As you age, your social circle naturally shrinks through death, illness, and mobility changes. It feels easier and safer to rely on the one person who's always been there, your child, rather than invest energy in building new relationships. There's also a comfort in familiar relationships where you don't have to explain your history or prove your worth. Fear plays a huge role too. Fear of being judged by new people, fear that your peers will be boring or depressing, fear that you won't fit in with senior groups, or fear that admitting you need social connections makes you appear weak or needy. So you default to what feels safe, your family. There's also an unconscious power dynamic at play. When you make one person responsible for your happiness and social needs, you're placing enormous emotional burden on them while maintaining control over their time and attention. It can feel like love, but it's actually a form of emotional dependency. Here's the shocking truth about this final habit: it's the most relationship-destroying behavior on this entire list because it turns love into obligation. When you refuse to build a social life outside your family, you're essentially making your adult children responsible for your emotional well-being. They start to feel trapped, guilty for wanting their own lives, and resentful of the constant pressure to be your primary source of companionship. Here's how to break the isolation cycle. Start small with structured social activities. Senior centers, religious organizations, hobby groups, or volunteer opportunities provide built-in conversation starters and shared interests. You don't have to become best friends immediately, just practice being around people regularly. Challenge your assumptions about peer socialization. Other seniors your age have fascinating life stories, shared experiences, and often similar challenges. They're not depressing, they're survivors with wisdom and humor you might be missing. Set boundaries with family dependents. Instead of calling your adult child every time you're lonely, try reaching out to them with specific purposes, sharing good news, asking about their lives, or planning special activities together. This transforms your relationship from needy dependence to mutual enjoyment. Remember, diversifying your social connections actually strengthens your family relationships. When you have multiple sources of companionship and support, your time with family becomes more precious and less pressured. Your children will want to spend time with you because they choose to, not because they feel obligated to be your only social outlet. Pause right now and honestly ask yourself, do I do any of these 9 behaviors? Be brutally honest, your relationships depend on it. Comment below, which habit surprised you the most? I'm curious to see if number 9 shocked you as much as it did me when I first recognized this pattern. And how many of you have a family member who constantly gives unsolicited advice like we discussed in number 4? Let me know in the comments. You're definitely not alone in dealing with this. Remember, awareness is the first step to change. These 9 habits don't have to define your golden years. You have the power to adjust these behaviors and strengthen your relationships starting today. If this opened your eyes, watch my video on how to have difficult conversations with family members. It's the perfect follow-up to help you address these issues with loved ones. Subscribe for more honest advice that helps seniors live their best life without sugar-coating the hard truths.